How would you feel if your mother, the person who is supposed to love you most in this world, the one meant to protect you above all else, abandoned you like an object left on the street, all for the love of a man? It seems impossible, doesn't it? After all, a mother should never hurt her child, right? Well, let me show you that this is not just fiction. I wish I could say that every story ends happily, but sadly, that is not the case. Once upon a time, in a small village in Africa, there lived a family of 4. Amarachi was a young mother, and Olufemi was her hard-working husband. They had 2 children, Obie, who was 10 years old, and Nala, who was 6. Life was tough for this family. They lived in a small house with very little food. Olufemi worked hard every day in the fields to provide for them, but their situation never seemed to improve. Despite his efforts, Amarachi was never satisfied. She often complained about her life, feeling stuck and unhappy. "I deserve more than this," she would say. "I need a husband who can give me a better life." These words hurt Olufemi deeply. He worked day and night, sacrificing everything for his family. But no matter how hard he tried, it was never enough for Amarachi. She looked at her friends who lived in beautiful homes and wore nice clothes. They seemed happy, and she wanted the same for herself. Every time she saw them, her heart filled with envy. At some point, she even began to complain about her own children, saying things like, "I could have left and lived a beautiful life, but because of you, I'm stuck here. Having kids with your poor, useless dad ruined my life." Olufemi tried to make up for her hurtful words with his love, hugging his children each time Amarachi said something unkind. But Obie and Nala would cry all night, not understanding why their mum didn't seem to love them. Olufemi kept working harder and harder in the field. He wanted to pay for his children's education so they could have a better life than he did. But fate would not be kind to him. One day, Olufemi fell gravely ill, barely able to move. He had been trying to support the family, but now he needed help. Amarachi had to step up and work at the market. It was a tough adjustment for her. Each night, when she returned home, she would complain about her day, about how unfair life was. She shouted at Olufemi, blaming him for their situation. "I didn't sign up for this life," she would yell. Olufemi couldn't say a word. He would just cry, praying that his health would improve so he could return to work and fulfill his duties. One day, Amarachi's neighbor came by to say hello. Amarachi complained about her struggles and how difficult it was to work at the market. Her neighbor listened patiently and then offered her a suggestion. "I know a wealthy man in the city who is looking for a maid. His last maid was my cousin, and she just left. If you don't mind working there and being away from your family, I can help you get the job." Amarachi's heart raced. Maybe this was her chance. If she could work in the city, she could earn money and buy the things she wanted. After thinking it over quickly, she decided to accept her neighbor's offer. The next morning, she packed a small bag with a few clothes and said a quick goodbye to her family. They were heartbroken, but understood it was necessary. When she arrived in the city, Amarachi went to the address her neighbor had given her. It was a luxurious home owned by a man named Mr. Aku. He was an older man with a lot of money. As soon as she arrived, Amarachi quickly caught Mr. Aku's eye with her beauty and grace.
Wow!
She was an exceptionally beautiful woman, and her smile could drive anyone crazy. Mr. Aku immediately hired her, and she started working in his house every day. The salary was incredible, far more than she had ever seen before. Captivated by her beauty, Mr. Aku found every possible excuse to talk to her. He soon began buying her gifts and giving her extra money as presents. Amarachi quickly realized that Mr. Aku was flirting with her, and she decided to take advantage of the situation. She began spending more and more time with Mr. Aku, going on holidays with him, shopping together, and eventually she cheated on Olufemi with her boss. At first, Amarachi returned to visit her family often, bringing them a little money each time. Olufemi noticed how his wife looked happier and dressed in fancier clothes. When he asked her where she got the money for all her new clothes, she would reply, "That's none of your business." But as she became more settled in her new life with Mr. Aku, Amarachi's visits home grew less frequent. She started coming home every weekend, then only once a month, and eventually she stopped visiting altogether. The children missed their mother, and Olufemi did his best to give them as much love as he could. Then one day, Mr. Aku, completely captivated by Amarachi, asked her to marry him. But there was one condition: she had to leave her children and old life behind. He wanted Amarachi solely for himself, with no ties to her past. Amarachi didn't hesitate. She agreed without a second thought, ready to start a new life, free from the struggles of her past. When Amarachi returned to tell Olufemi about the divorce, he was shattered. His heart broke into pieces. He fell at her feet, crying and begging her not to leave him. "What about our children?" he pleaded, tears streaming down his face. "Please don't leave, Amarachi. I'll find the money somehow. I'll sell my kidney. I'll do anything, but please don't leave. Please." But Amarachi's mind was already made up. She pushed him away, telling him to leave her alone. The children cried and ran after her, but she didn't acknowledge their presence. The pain of losing his wife was too much for Olufemi. Now alone with his children, he had to find a way to feed them. He had no choice but to return to the fields. Olufemi tried to work, but his illness only grew worse. He could barely hold his machete and stay standing, yet he had no other choice. One day, while pulling weeds in the field, Olufemi collapsed. Obie, who witnessed it, rushed to his father's side, crying. Olufemi looked at his son and said, "I'm sorry I can't stay longer to protect you and your sister. But I will watch over you from the sky, I promise. I love you, son." These were his final words. Olufemi passed away, leaving Obi and Nala alone in the small house. The brother and sister hugged each other at night, crying together. Obi reassured Nala that their dad was in the sky, in a beautiful place, and that one day they would see him again. At only 12 years old, Obi felt responsible for taking care of his little sister. He knew that without parents or money, they could barely survive. So he decided to find their mother, Amarachi. They knocked on their neighbor's door and asked for their mum's new address in the city. The neighbor, knowing that Amarachi was now living comfortably with Mr. Aku and could help them, didn't hesitate to give them the information they needed. Nala, excited to see her mother again, made a small bracelet with pearls for her. She thought it would make their mother happy and show her how much they missed her. The two siblings packed the small amount of food they had left and started the journey to the city. They didn't have the money for the minibus, so they had to walk for hours, filled with hope. Obie carried Nala on his back whenever she got tired. Sometimes he would cry from the scorching sun and exhaustion, but he kept going. When they finally arrived in the city, it was overwhelming. Tall buildings surrounded them, and people hurried past without noticing them. Then a person on a motorcycle snatched the bag from Obie's chest and sped away. He tried to run after him, but it was too late. Now they had nothing left, not even food. But Obie stayed strong for his little sister, holding her hand tightly. Tired, hungry and thirsty, they decided to spend the night outside to rest. "I'm scared, Obie," Nala said in a small voice. Obie hugged her tightly, just as their father used to do. "Don't worry, we'll find Mum," he reassured her. The next day they asked several people if they knew where their mother lived, showing them the address. Finally, someone pointed them in the right direction. Once again, Obie walked for hours with his sister on his back until they found Amarachi's new home. They were in awe of how big and luxurious the house was. Obie thought his mum was still working as a maid, so they waited outside, not wanting to cause her any trouble because of their dirty clothes and the smell from their long journey. Suddenly a car pulled up, and Amarachi stepped out, looking elegant and beautiful. The children couldn't contain their excitement and ran toward her, shouting, "Mom! Mom, we found you!" But when Amarachi saw her children, her face turned pale. She looked shocked and scared. "What are you doing here?" she shouted. "How did you find me? Are you trying to ruin my life?" Obie was stunned. "Mom, Dad passed away. We have nowhere else to go. We don't have food and we're starving." But Amarachi looked at them in disgust. "If you found me, you can find food. Move. I don't want to see you here." Nala cried, begging her mother to let them stay, and showed her the bracelet she'd made. But Amarachi turned her back on them, asking the security guard to kick them out. With no home and nowhere to go, Obi and Nala walked back to their village, crying the whole way. They felt abandoned and lost. Once back home, Obi searched through rubbish bins to find food for his sister. He also helped women carry their bags at the market to earn a small amount of money. Days turned into months, and one day, their landlord appeared at their door. "It's been months. You need to pay or leave now," he shouted. Obi, trembling with fear, begged the landlord. "We lost our father and we have no money. Please, give us some time." But the landlord didn't care and locked them out of the house. Obi and Nala were now homeless, with nowhere to go. They knocked on their neighbor's door and explained everything. The neighbor wanted to take them in, but her mean husband refused and asked the children to leave. They were now truly alone. As the weeks passed, they struggled to survive on the streets. Obi did what he could to find food. At night, he hugged Nala tightly, covering her with pieces of cardboard to keep her warm. One night, while searching for food, Nala fell ill. She started coughing and struggled to breathe. Obi took her to the hospital, but the doctors said they couldn't help without money. Desperate, Obi felt helpless as he watched his sister suffer. One night, as Nala lay weak and sick, she looked at her brother and said, "Obi, you told me Daddy is in the sky waiting for us. I want to join him. Maybe he will have food for me there." She could barely speak, but with her last strength, she handed him the bracelet, asking him to give it to their mother if he ever saw her again. Obi promised he would, tears streaming down his face. When he woke up the next morning, he realized Nala wasn't moving. Panic set in, and in his young, innocent mind, he tried to wake her up, but it was too late. Obi buried Nala himself, digging a small grave with his bare hands, just as he had seen done for his father. Heartbroken, he returned to the city, hoping to tell his mother that Nala had passed away. When he got close to her house, he saw Amarachi leaving with Mr. Aku, and to his shock, she was pregnant. At that moment, Obi understood the truth. His mother didn't want him or Nala and had a new family. Devastated, he turned and walked away, a small child lost in the big city with no idea where to go. Finding food became even harder than it had been in the village. He spent days without eating, growing weaker by the day. One day, as he lay on the ground, too weak to move, a kind couple found him. They rushed him to the hospital and gave him food, saving his life. When Obi had regained his strength, he told them everything that had happened to him. The couple, Mr. and Mrs. Achebe, were shocked and heartbroken. They couldn't have children of their own, and they saw Obi as a blessing. They took him into their home, and although they weren't rich, they were ready to give him all the love in the world. Obi was grateful to finally have adults caring for him. But despite his new life, he often thought of his little sister, Nala. At night, he would cry alone, holding the bracelet close to his heart. As the years passed, Obi excelled in school. He worked hard, and his new parents were proud of him. Eventually, he earned a scholarship to study at a prestigious university. During his time at university, Obi became well known. He was strikingly handsome, always in a good mood and top of his class. Many girls wanted to be his girlfriend, even competing for his attention. But Obie had eyes for only one girl, Lily. She was a kind and supportive young woman who shared his dreams and aspirations. They grew close, and soon they were inseparable. After graduation, Obie quickly found a job in business. He worked hard, rising through the corporate ranks swiftly and impressing his bosses with his intelligence and dedication. But Obie never forgot his past, and he always wore his sister's bracelet as a reminder. Eventually, Obie started his own business and became very successful. He married Lily, and they bought a beautiful house in a nice neighborhood. Soon after, they welcomed their first little boy, whom he named Olufemi. Obie's adoptive parents were overjoyed with his success and supported him at every step. 20 years after losing his sister, Obie now had a loving wife, a wonderful child, supportive parents, a thriving business, a beautiful home, and a luxury car. His life seemed perfect, but everything would soon come crashing down when his past reappeared unexpectedly. One morning, Obie woke up feeling especially happy. He was about to close an important business deal that would bring in significant money. A man was selling his house and other properties because his business had gone bankrupt, and Obie was about to buy them at half the market price. Before he left the house, Lily looked at him and said, "You look so handsome. Good luck, baby. But don't forget to come home early today to meet our new maid." Obie promised he would be home on time and left the house. When he arrived at the office, he was stunned to find that the seller waiting for him was Mr. Aku. The same Mr. Aku who had once been with his mother. Obie hadn't forgotten his face in 20 years. But Obie stayed calm and said nothing. Obviously, Mr. Aku did not recognize him. How could he? After the meeting, Obie rushed home, eager to tell Lily about the strange coincidence. But what awaited him there was far more shocking than anything he could have imagined. When Obie entered the house, Lily rushed over to him and said, "Oh, I'm so glad you're back on time. Let me introduce you to the new maid." Obie froze, dropping his bag. He was stunned to see Amarachi, his own mother, standing in his living room. What Obie didn't know at that moment was that the devil had just entered his house and was about to mess up everything he had worked hard to build. Part 2 is coming soon. Until next time, take care and keep the stories alive.